Well, first, I want to thank you, Ginat, for inviting me to be here and to everybody for being here and joining in this session. I'm going to actually, because this is a textual focus, I'm going to screen share and put up the text, and we'll sort of look at it together. And we'll spend the hour going over the text and thinking about the Torah themes and words and how they sort of relate to your larger, macrobiotic vision. So, and I think you'll educate me about much of that as we go. I'm gonna just, can everybody see the text?
Yes.
Okay. So this is my focus. Law, natural and human reflections in text in a Jewish key. And I'm just going to read the opening blurb and notes, and then we're going to just dive into the text. I encourage people to jump in with questions, thoughts as we go. We might not get through everything. That's okay. If we can get deep, that's good. So our session will use Torah text and rabbinic commentary as a springboard into shared reflection on the interdependence of and balance between human decisions and natural processes in making or unmaking a world. I want to underscore that this relation between what is human and what is natural is, I think, trickier from the perspective of Jewish tradition than one might think. It's not quite a binary. It's not quite this versus that. There truly is an interactive element to this. And I think we may find ourselves faced with some surprises. For example, we may discover that this notion that sort of nature is good, uniformly good, humans uniformly bad, not so much. Not so fast with that. I think the texts are going to at least hint at the notion that there's some very problematic elements to nature. And so, and those problematic elements interact with human things. Some themes that I think will probably, I welcome you to bring along or to reflect on in relation to this is truth and the impacts of man-made, what about woman-made, and natural law. And then the idea, Ginat and I, when we had coffee and we were talking about flexible beliefs, how that—
I didn't have coffee.
Right, true, fair enough. Tea and coffee, and how that relates to yin and yang. We're going to look at two Torah texts, one Genesis 6:13, and then the other is Deuteronomy 11:17. And I just want to point out, the texts are all from Sefaria.org, which is basically the JPS translation. And the two commentators are Seforno, who was 15th, 16th century Italian rabbi, and then Rashi, 11th, 12th century French. Okay, let's just dive in.
Sorry, what is JPS? I didn't know.
Jewish Publication Society.
Okay, thank you.
It's also used by the conservative movement. I am not a conservative rabbi, but they have a good translation, and they work, basically they use the Jewish Publication Society second version. There was an early one in the early 20th century, and this one is late 20th century. Okay, so let's start with this text. I'm going to assume that we're going to just focus in English, but I have the Hebrew. If people want to jump in with the Hebrew, any thoughts about it, I may refer to the Hebrew at certain points. And again, I encourage you to please, speak up. God said to Noah, I have decided to put an end to all flesh. That's not what it says. We're going to go back to the Hebrew and see what it actually says. But this translation is rough. For the earth is filled with violent wrongdoing. I changed it from lawlessness because I think violent wrongdoing is really the correct translation of the word Hamas. Because of them, I'm about to destroy them with the earth. So the part that is not, I'm going to now go back and give you a more literal translation. Elohim, which is the plural singular, it's a corporate singular for God, said to Noach, the end of all flesh has come before me. That's really what it means. For the earth is filled with Hamas, this violent wrongdoing because of them. And behold, I am wiping out, I'm destroying the earth, okay? So just on a, I'm going to stop. Well, I'm going to keep it here for a second. I do want to see your faces at some point. Just like any kind of open initial kind of impression about sort of the tonality of that, the energy of that statement. I'm going to, just take a look at it. I kind of want to see some faces here, but just the tonality of that, putting aside the meaning, what's the mood of that? I have decided, the end of all flesh has come before me, and I'm going to wipe it all out. Like, what's takes on that? Any thoughts about that?
Pretty typical.
Typical. Explain. What's typical about it?
Well, the dialogue between God and the creatures that he's fashioned,
Okay,
is filled with the statements such as this. Who was it who negotiated with God about the number of righteous in Nineveh? Right.
well, that was Abraham, and it was Sodom and Gomorrah. And
there you go.
That's later on, and that's perhaps, and that's a little off our track. That's showing a more compassionate side of God, a God who is willing to listen to human beings. Noah, however, just does what he's told. He doesn't interact with God other than to do what he's told.
Very good.
So let's look and see how what Seforno, this child of the Italian Renaissance, this rabbi of the Italian Renaissance, says. This is not a bad translation. There's some things about it I would tweak, but not bad. So here's what Seforno says. So that now I will destroy them together with the earth. I guess them is referring to human beings, or maybe more than human beings, the life forms. I will destroy the climate which could support life on earth how will I do that? I'm going to get the earth off its tilt. I'm going to tilt the earth away from the way it should be. I mean, imagine that. And rearrange it from the beginning of the deluge for the entire future. So he goes on to say, Sforno, we find that God explained this to Job. This is a little diversion. This is a reference to how God describes God's self to Job as basically ordaining and ordering all of the forces of all of the features of the cosmos. God is in charge of everything in this profound way beyond human understanding. And then back to the text. This accounts for the lifespan of man having been drastically reduced after the deluge, meaning after Noah's flood. The climate of the earth changed. There were greater extremes of heat and cold. The produce of the earth was considerably less capable of supporting a long lifespan. As a byproduct of this deterioration in the quality of the vegetable products, man was allowed to eat meat as a compensation. Okay, so that's...
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
I think it has to do with quality.
You froze a little bit, so I didn't catch it has to do with quality, and then you froze. I'm not, am I the only one who heard the freezing?
Yeah, I didn't hear it.
And quantity. In terms of vegetables,
Yeah,
only
Nava, I'm missing
probably
much of what you're saying.
quality eating vegetable, the quality, yeah, my name is Nava. The quality of their personality, their musar,
Their moral standing.
the moral standards went down, so they became more like the animals. So they had to eat the animals. And also in terms of quantity, how much people need to eat in order to survive. so what happens? It's like today, food is not for eating, it's for making money. And that's not what God meant.
Okay. And I think the question of what God's intentions are in this is important. I want to just highlight a couple of things about the text that may be a clue to getting us back or getting us thinking about this issue of balance. It talks, first of all, it says very clearly that some human beings have effectively put the Earth off its orbit. Okay, that's a pretty powerful thing to say. I mean, I think that's probably beyond human ability. I sure hope it is. But the notion that in this age of the Renaissance, they were beginning to think about what is the relation between, how do human beings actually affect the world around them? What is our relationship to it? So that's going from the human to, human intentionality or human purpose or purposelessness to our effect on the world. Any other thoughts about this particular passage from Seforno? His notion of specifically maybe focused on his idea that human beings have this tremendous power, to get things out of balance in the entire solar system, in the entire cosmos. Thoughts about that? I mean, is that true? Do we have that power?
I would say, I would say yes. Look at global warming. If you believe in global warming, then we humans, not all, some of us have been environmental activists forever, have made conditions so now that we have the ability now to destroy the earth with further doing nothing or with taking action. But hopefully with that action, we can slow down things. I don't know if that.
Thank you, Michelle. Does everybody agree that human beings have the power to destroy the world?
I would agree, because I don't think there's a separation between God and us. We are God, God is us. So that when we say God can do something, it's the same as we can do something.
What about
I have
go
a
ahead.
problem. I have a problem whenever there's a sentence saying humans can do whatever X, because like Michelle said, there's also humans doing Y. So yes, it seems like a lot of people are doing things that are taking for granted a lot of stuff and ruining the earth. On the other hand, there's a lot of awareness of being more sustainable and less commercialism. I mean, we heard it here tonight.
Yeah.
So there's both, that yin and yang business. Yeah.
I just want to check if there's any. Okay. Yes,
I'd like to
I
add
was looking.
something.
Yes, please.
If you've ever driven past a landfill and seen what has people dump furniture, things from, I mean, just all kinds of stuff. We're not just talking, table scraps, but when you look at that and you look at the fact that that's not going anywhere, what is it doing to our earth? And those piles are getting higher and deeper, and we can't do anything about it.
I feel sad living in Israel. As I walk out the entranceway of my building, I see just garbage. And I'm thinking, if this is the Holy Land, then what's the deal with that? What's the deal with that kind of attitude?
On the other hand, in Tel Aviv, there's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful park that was built on a garbage heap.
Yes, I've driven past it, right. So you never know. Okay, I'm going to share again. I want to go back to the text. So one of the things that I'm struck by I'm looking at the Hebrew of this passage from Sforno now. It talks about how we've changed the weather, we changed the tilt of the axis of the earth. I really don't think that's possible, given maybe it is. But it then has this very interesting thing at the end of it, where it says, given what we did, given the fact that we messed things up so bad, we are given this sort of special, just, and even to the effect where our lifespan was affected. And then lo and behold, not as a reflection of our having been debased in any way, but rather as a sort of gesture of maybe divine compassion. We're allowed to eat meat. I'm a vegan myself. I just want to put that out there. But I think the way it's put there is it's not viewed as in any way a negative thing. It's almost as a sort of way of showing compassion for us, which is very strange to me, being a vegan, that this would be a sort of a sign of compassion. Because to me, I would go more with, I'm trying to remember who said, I'm still getting the names, who said that it's a reflection, I think it was Nava, that it's a sign of our debasement, that we become like animals. On the other hand, I'm one of those people who doesn't believe that we are superior to other animals. I think we are animals. Okay, so anyway, that's the Genesis passage, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. And I just wanted to highlight another passage to which it refers, which is this one right here.
Can I say one more thing, please?
Bavakasha, please.
I think that, I don't know how to say it in English, but like compost is using what God gave us and turning it through the earth to something that supports the growing again. So, and all these cycles, the moment but the compost is an example, but being part of the cycle, and that's, I think, another thing that God wants. We also die and our body becomes something for new life. So
yes,
that
gets to a point that I want to drive at. I think we're going to see it in the Deuteronomy passage. That is the sort of the negative stuff that we think about, like dying. You can't get more negative than that on the surface. It is kind of positive in its way. It serves a purpose for us, for our species, for our world. Death is part of it, and how do we get our heads around that? Anyway, before we go on, I think when we get into the Deuteronomy piece, we're going to see it's not just about stuff that is bad about us, but stuff that is kind of negative about things, those cute, cuddly little animals that we think about. It's going to talk about that. But first, I just want to point out this passage, which all this stuff is referring to. It's this passage, verse 29. It's basically a proof text for saying that the original human diet was vegan. It's right there. And it says that the animals also are vegan. So, I don't know if we want to go to that extreme, but I think the Torah has a sort of idealized view, perhaps, of what human beings are capable of. In a way, just as it starts out with the premise that we can be lifted out of our baser instincts, if you want to call eating meat a baser instinct. There's that, but there's also the idea that eating meat may be a compensation. Those two things are sort of working together in an interesting way, I think. Okay, I'm going to now I want to shift to the next passage, which I think is quite brutal in its depiction of human capacities in relation to nature. For Hashem's anger will flare against you. This is basically the rewards and punishments that comes both in Leviticus and then in the book of Deuteronomy as a sort of reminder. Hashem's anger will flare up against you, shutting up the skies so that there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce. And you will soon perish from the good land that Hashem is assigning to you. Okay, so that's another tough commentary on human lack of decency, human refusal to be obedient to the divine rhythms, if you want to look at it that way. Any reactions just to that text itself before we get to the commentary?
Isn't something either that or something like it in the Shema? And I never
Oh,
understood
yes.
why it's there. Why in the
V'hayim
middle of all
Shemoah.
this?
It's absolutely there. And so in fact, you know, basically what we're looking at that basic concept, that text. And it repeats itself. We see it here. We see it in different places in the Torah. In Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, it just keeps popping up. It's a reminder. But what did you have a specific reason for asking about that?
Yeah, because I thought the Shema was supposed to be our total belief in God and everything. And then all of a sudden this negative thing comes in the middle of it. I never understood that.
However, the first paragraph of the Shema, like I don't have it, I could go to the text. I mean, we could look at it in a second. I'm kind of worried that it would take time and away, but basically the first paragraph is say, follow the mitzvot, be good boys and girls, follow the mitzvot. And then it proceeds to say,
Well, it talks about loving him, just loving him.
yeah, I mean, you know what I'm going to do? Forgive me for doing this. I'm going to do this anyway, because I think it's worth, as long as you bring it up, I think it is worth talking about. We're going to go to the Siddur and we're going to take a quick look at it. It's going to take a few seconds here though. We may as well look at it. I'm going to look at the Siddur Ashkenaz. We're going to go to the Shema and its blessings. Let's see if we can find it here. Shachrit, blessings of the Shema. Here we go. So here we are. We're going to go to the Shema. It's kind of, here we go. We're almost there. Here's the Shema. And now here's that first passage. That's from Deuteronomy. Basically, be good Jews, follow the mitzvot. And then v'hayim shemoah. If you obey, everything will be fine. But if you don't obey, you will be wiped off the face of the earth. Right? So remember to do the mitzvot. That's what it's saying. And then remember how to do it. But it's that second paragraph that I think you're referring to. That same concept here. Okay? So did you have a further question about that or thought about that?
I got it. I understand.
Okay. So now we're going to shift, but I just want to underscore, this is again about balance, you know, going back to the idea of, you know, what is natural and what is human? Well, what it's really saying is that if we do not obey God's laws, however we define them, Ginat was talking in a more perhaps, you know, pantheistic way about, or panentheistic way maybe, about what God is and how we relate to God. But if we're not in that balance, then we're going to get, things are going to get off kilter, and this is going to happen. We're going to lose our connection with nature. But the premise, one of the premises I think we have to be careful in thinking about is the assumption that somehow nature is going to remind us of something bad that we are doing that is out of sync with God's plan for us in nature, in relation to nature. However, I think we're going to now see in the next text that it's more complicated than that, that nature itself has its own demons, you might say. So let's see now what Rashi has to say. There's two commentaries. Here's the first one. In addition to all the other sufferings, you all see this one? In addition to all the other sufferings, I will banish you from the soil. Please note what it said, which made you sin. The soil made you sin. We're going to come back to that. Actually, let's stop, just stop for a second and think about that. What does that mean? The soil made you sin. And the Hebrew, the translation is accurate with the Hebrew. The soil made you sin. What is that about? The soil made you sin, huh? I thought the idea was that we have to be in sync with nature, you know, very Taoistic. But no, the soil made you sin. What's going on there, folks? Any thoughts about that?
Does it have anything to do with the selfishness or the how we assume things and didn't really respect it?
Yeah, but it's saying the soil itself, meaning the earth itself, is what made us sin. How does that show our disrespect?
In macro, it has to do with excess. And when you talk about sinning in macro, you're talking about having excessive earth energy.
Nice, beautiful. And I'm not sure, Ginat, in terms of yin yang, you were talking about what's yin and what's yang. Like, is that too much of a yang kind of thing or too much of a yin thing? I'm not. Educate me, please.
And it depends on context. Seth. In this particular case that we're talking about, it's considered to be yin. And the first two lines of the Oriental hexagram refer to the earth. The upper two lines refer to heaven. Those are energies, and the human is in the middle. And
is this like the I Ching? Are you referring to those
that's
lines in
correct.
I Ching?
Absolutely correct. And so the human represented by the middle two lines of the hexagram, absorbing excessive yin energy from the earth directly below.
So this is a perfect bridge with the Taoist kind of thinking that's going on.
Correct.
Beautiful,
yeah, because the Taoists, they take from the I Ching as well.
That's really cool. Wonderful. Any other thoughts just about this idea that the earth is what's making us sin?
I wonder if it somehow is saying that original sin, that we come from the earth, from the soil, so that we are, as soon as we become flesh and no longer only spirit, that we then have resistance in us.
People, what do you think about that idea, original sin, which is not a Jewish idea, it's a Christian idea? It clearly is rooted in a Jewish concern with human excess, but it's the idea of the originality of it, that we made this fatal flaw when we ate the fruit, and then
we'll explain it just a little bit more without making it pejorative to say fatal flaw. It's not a flaw. Rather, what I'm thinking is that in becoming corporal, we then embody literally resistance. And that's where this so-called sin means missing the mark, right? So we don't have that direct anymore spirituality that we came from. We now, in addition, have a physicality, and that's misses the mark of spirituality.
Chet is missing the mark. But are you saying, Ginat, that are you saying that sinfulness is? Well, I'm not sure. You're saying something about sinfulness as missing the mark, and you're connecting it to our earthliness.
Yes.
Is there? I think there's a piece of it that I'm not getting yet. In terms of.
I don't agree. No, our like macrobiotics, our point here on earth is to make the balance of the spirituality and the earthness, if you want to call it earthness, the physicality.
So are you disagreeing with the premise that this is about original sin?
Totally disagreeing with it, yeah.
It's about balance.
Right.
For me, our purpose on earth is not balance. Our purpose is spirituality, is returning to that's the point of having faith, is to remember who we truly are.
You use the word, Ginat, you use the word resistance. Yeah. And just from a Jewish perspective, I think resistance has its role to play too. And I'm wondering if in the hexagram, in the I Ching hex, like 6 lines, if there's something about the idea of resistance as having some role to play. Jacob struggles. Yisrael means one who struggles with God. And I'm wondering where resistance plays in. Yes, God says to Israel, you are resisting my truth. You must surrender to it. And yet I think there's also maybe room for Abraham. Back to Abraham, unlike Noah, Abraham resisted God's, I'm just going to wipe everything out. Abraham resisted God's, that thing that God was doing. So I'm wondering if even resistance can be reclaimed, redeemed in some way, in terms of the shivyon, the idea of balance.
Yeah.
Hello?
Speak.
Hello? Can you hear me?
I
We
can.
can hear you.
Okay.
Please speak.
Yeah. Could it be like the sunflower turns to the sun, and we're the sunflower and the earth is the sun? The earth has seasons that we're not in charge of,
Hmm.
and we're the sunflower turning to the sun.
So we're not in charge. Are you saying, but then human beings who resist the sun, that's where things go wrong? Is that what you mean?
Everybody is affected. Everybody, whatever it looks like on the surface, everybody is affected by the seasons of the earth. Sunny day, rainy day, winter, summer, we're all affected. And we're not in charge of that.
Yeah. So if you resist, sometimes the resistance is working against what is healthy, what is good,
No, you're always affected.
no matter what.
No matter what, you're affected by the season, no matter what.
Okay.
And you're not guilty and you're not wonderful. You are just affected.
So like in the book of the Tao Te Ching, how he talks about how the water is resisting the stone, and yet it is part of nature's way as well, and it has its effect on the patterns and the rhythms that are life fulfilling.
I think that's where the idea of balance comes in, that when we can have natural human resistance, not in an extreme way, then it's human nature.
Good.
So that's where we look for the balance.
Good. Beautiful. I want to move on to the next piece of
I
this.
want to ask you something, Seth. This is Nava.
Yes, please.
Suddenly the pasuk came to me, בראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ, והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו. I'm trying to think about what the Aretz
Just to
did.
translate
What this was
for
the sin
people.
of the Aretz.
Hold on, Nava. I just want to make sure everyone understands that God created the heavens and the earth was essentially chaotic, or everything was chaos. Tohu vavohu. Go on. I just wanted to translate it.
This was the sin of the earth. Yeah, thank you. So maybe this was the sin of the earth, because I don't see another option.
Well,
That's interesting. So the sin is being chaotic.
But that is part of what God has to work with in order to create a world. God creates fashions or creates order out of chaos. That's what the Genesis 1 basically is saying. So
That's what Macrobiotics does too. We understand an order to the universe and we apply it to ourselves.
The Torah is macrobiotics, maybe in that sense.
Absolutely.
I want to go to this parable, though. This is, I think, a wonderful, very down-to-earth, speaking of earth, parable. It may be compared to the case of a king who sent his son to a banqueting hall and earnestly charged him, "Do not eat more than you need in order that you may come home clean." The son, however, took no notice of this. He ate and drank more than he needed, and he threw it all up and basically got everyone disgustingly dirty. They took him by his hands and feet and they threw him out of the palace. Okay. So that could be a commentary on, that's basically the commentary on what God is saying will happen to us if we don't go with God's plan. But here, the idea is basically, you've been warned, people, you've been warned, and you know, if you don't do it this way, it's not gonna end pretty. It's not gonna be pretty for you. But please notice that this doesn't happen by itself. This guy, this brat, is not kicked out of the party by himself. There's people who kick him out. And so my question to you all, is, who are these people? What do they symbolize in terms of this process of restoring balance? Who are these people?
Exactly. These are the macrobiotic teachers. That might be a bit arrogant.
Well, or are they forces of nature that are mobilized to, like, you know, we are in nature with all these other, we're in a party, you know, we're at a party basically. And we're not kind of partying very respectfully, very decently. And so other people in the party are getting ready to throw us out. And who are they? Yeah, I know the macrobiotic teachers are definitely seeing what's going on, but I'm suggesting maybe those other actors in the party, who are they?
According to macrobiotics and the order of the universe, I mean, it would be the disorder that we've created and therefore causes like sickness or whatever else caused by the extremes.
So the ones teaching the lesson, kicking out or getting the discharge or the response from the prince would be nature.
Yes.
So the forces of nature are kicking us out because they're expelling us because we don't fit into their design.
Because
Well,
we've
the terrorists.
extreme.
Other thoughts about that? I have a thought about that, but I'm curious if other people, maybe people who haven't spoken, who might want to speak up.
Well, the terrorists, they're kicking us out. Iran, Biden. If we're not good, the different countries have different characteristics. The land gives them different characteristics, and we're supposed to fix that in ourselves.
I'm suggesting though that, thank you. Yeah, I mean, basically we've got watch guards, people watching and ready to pounce, to correct, or if not, that doesn't work, to pounce and to expel. I'm wondering how that idea that within nature there's forces ready to mobilize against our adventures, whether along with those, going back to this idea that the earth itself is somehow implicated in the negative. Remember, I'm going to go back to the screen share to show you that one again. The idea that the soil is expelling, that the soil itself is making us sin. Well, if the soil is making us sin, and the soil or the forces of nature are also expelling us because we're sinning, where's nature in relation to human agency in all this? What's the agency of nature in relation to human nature? How does the balance work there if nature is both part of what makes us sin and also what checks is a check on our sinfulness? How does that work?
Seth, in macro, we say that opposites attract. And we say that similarities repel. And if we say that the human is becoming more like the earth, there's going to be a repelling force between them.
Sounds like the Torah is very macrobiotic.
And so the end result is going to be an expulsion. You see, the two of them will create, the two similarities will create a repulsion between them, a repulsive force that will end up expelling the human.
Wow, I feel as if I'm learning something, like it's always, I guess this is going well for me. I'm very selfish about this. Like, I'm learning something here. This is really fascinating. And I kind of knew, I knew that there is that connection, you know, that our Torah tradition and the other traditions of wisdom are trying to communicate to the greater humanity something important that we need to remember, but also I think they're communicating to each other. Kind of as if, you know, when you're really listening on a summer, like it's getting to be summer here almost, you know, in Israel, and you begin to listen to how the creatures are communicating and how the plants are communicating. It's all sort of this symphony of balance and tension, you know, and it's quite rich and meaningful. And I guess we have to really be listening, our ears to the ground to that. There is one more text I wanted to look at though. But before,
I want to say one more thing.
yes, I
please,
wanted to
about
ask
this.
if others had more to say, please.
Yeah, I think that there is a hidden aspect that we are not always aware of, is when God made order in the world, he used time. Time is an element which affects or determines a change. So something transformed from something to something else. And God created the time, and in time, so it's the same when I leave food outside of the fridge for more than 3 days, it becomes bad. It transforms to something else.
That's a perfect
So,
segue to this final
wonder-
segment, because I'm sorry, go ahead, finish your thought.
Okay. No, okay, yeah. So my question how do you consider time in this process of balance?
Let's look at this second midrash from Rashi, because it talks about time as allotted to human beings and how we relate to the realm of time. So let's take a look at it. Eini noten lachem arka, I will give you no respite, meaning you are going to be just pushed off the land. That's Deuteronomy. But now he wheels it back to Genesis. He wheels it back. Look, he wheels it back to what we were looking at like shortly before what we were looking at the very beginning. This whole thing about the flood. And he says, his days shall be, this is a reference to Genesis 6, shall be, and then a respite shall be given him for 120 years. So the text says, basically, I'm going to go to the text in a second. We're going to see what it actually says literally. I replied, the generation of the flood had no one from whom to learn, but you have someone from whom to learn. So one thing I take it from it, Nava, is that time, the function of time here is it's a teacher. Time is a teacher. Time educates us. And so before we get back to Genesis 6, I just want to make sure if there's any questions about this text. So the idea is a respite was given to the generation of the flood, meaning we are, from the experience of the flood, God calculates people can live 120 years. And that's, the people before the generation of flood, they were living hundreds and hundreds of years. That wasn't cool. That wasn't good. I remember when I took Tai Chi when I lived in New York many years ago, and they had pictures of Tai Chi masters on the wall. These people were like hundreds of years old. And, I thought, okay, but 120 years, that's supposedly the max, or the kind of the sweet spot for human life. But the idea is maybe in 120 years, you can get your act together and know how to be a mensch. So before I turn to the Genesis 6 passage that this is referring to, because I think that Rashi is doing sort of a take on what this idea of 120 years means. I think it means I'm not going to let people live longer than that, basically. But here it's the other way around. I'm going to give people a break and allow them to live 120 years. But what do people take from this passage here that I just read? Any thoughts about it? The idea of respite, because Rashi is challenging the idea that God isn't going to give respite to people. I'm not going to give you like an extra, a bonus time. I'm not going to give you more time. I'm going to just wipe you away quickly. And then all of a sudden it says, no, I'm going to let people live 120 years. So what do you take from this whole thing? And Rashi's response, which is, well, how does it work that way? He says, well, look, the people of the generation of the flood, they had no one to learn from. They were kind of babes in the woods. They didn't have anyone to tell them what to do. So, however, you, generations that follow, you can learn from their example. That's how I'm taking it. Other thoughts about it?
Maybe that's the function of time. I'd like to hear, Seth, if you have more reflections on the concept of time.
Yeah, I mean, just to note that if there's time in our session, I will want to go back and look at what actually Genesis 6:3 actually says, as opposed to how these rabbis tweak it to serve their agendas. But you're asking me my view of time? Well, I'll confess to you folks, I'm a bit of I'm kind of weird about that. I don't really believe in time, per se. I don't believe that time, this is my own personal, if you want to call it theology or anti-theology, I don't know what it is. I don't really believe that time, I think time is a construction of the human imagination, basically. And I think everything is happening simultaneously. This is my own kind of religious viewpoint. I've had experiences that just lend me to the view, as long as you asked, Gina.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be part of my shiur, but I think that time, I believe with the rabbis, there's no before or after in the Torah. We are living Torah, we are Torah. And so we are learning from everything, and it's all happening simultaneously. Everything is happening simultaneously, I think. Heaven and hell is happening simultaneously. Everything is happening simultaneously. And time is a way, and I'm referring to something that I learned from Laura, who is here, about what John Lennon said, what is the passage? Time is a way for, I forget exactly how it goes, but time is a kind of way of establishing boundaries so that things don't all happen all at once. So that we can't, it's a way of processing. It's a processing device, basically, for us. But I don't really believe in it, per se.
But that processing is what you named as teacher.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that.
Exactly, it's a teacher. Time is our teacher, and our teacher is our Torah, our moreh, our morah, our Torah. So I think that, and that's why I kind of wanted to end on that last passage, because I think it's really actually offering a note of hope for us. It's basically saying we can maybe learn, maybe over time we'll get it right. That's the positive take I have on it. Or it could be, if you don't figure it out over time, you're gonna be toast. But Gina, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Well, you certainly had a good beginning.
Yeah.
What about
Yeah.
6 days you work, on the seventh you rest? There's no time there? Or the months of the year, or Rosh Chodesh, or any of those things? They're all time concepts.
Yes, I think that living in the practical world, I learned a little bit from Hinduism and from yogic tradition, the idea that we live in this sort of world of practicalities. And that world of practicalities may not be the state where we ultimately, where we are most at home. We struggle in this world.
Resistant.
Yeah. And in the world where resistance is a factor, I think we have to cope. So we have teachers. You folks are teachers. I'm grateful to have had this time with you, to be learning from you. And I think in that sense, time is valuable. If you have the opportunity to learn, I think that living is about learning. And so we're in this world, if we're in this world to learn, then time can be our teacher, especially if it's so well spent as I have spent it with you. And I'm grateful for that, and hoping that maybe the circle of this learning that you shared with me can expand, and that what you're doing in this symposium over time will spread like ripples and bring other minds and consciousnesses and insights into the mix, and create a stronger current of insight that can emanate and transform. So thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Since there's
you.
no ending, then there can be no time. I can understand we can create an illusion of it. We can set up days and weeks and months. And then there's natural time, about how nature changes itself. And we follow that. The more we follow it, the better we feel.
Amen.
Thank you for asking questions, Seth, that led me to think. You're preparing the questions, you prepared the path.
Thank you. Well, it's questions are, questions in an enlightened environment can lead us to a more to more illumination, and the place of questioning sometimes takes us into dark, deep places. Sheol is a place of questioning, but also, hopefully, ha'olam hazeh, this world, and olam haba, we're the world that is coming. We're trying to find ways there with each other. So,
Amen.
We're on the
Thank
path
you.
together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seth?
And I'll just say, I'll stick around if anybody wants to, chat for a bit. I can be happy to be around and chat with you.
Seth, the word Hamas and the name of the political terrorist organization Hamas, which so fits its definition.
I think that it's a coincidence, but I don't believe in coincidences. The same way I don't believe in time. But yeah, exactly.
It's pretty strange.
Yeah. So yeah, it is indeed. But I've concluded my shiur, and I'm happy to speak with people if people want to chat.
Okay. Well, once again, Seth, just opportunity to thank you. I really appreciate.
Thank you, Ginat. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Well, it's been great. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure, and I wish everyone well and be in good health and be safe.
Thank
you so much.